In today's episode, we jump into one of the most horrifying crocodile attacks. From a Nile crocodile's ferocious ambush on a YouTuber to a teacher who got mauled on school grounds by the ancient predator. It was February 14th, 2017, and the late afternoon sun sat low over Lake Victoria, turning the bay's surface to gold. Reed beds line the shoreline, masking the presence of one of Africa's most efficient killers lurking just beneath the surface. Dylan Morales was a 25-year-old backpacker from Costa Rica who had been traveling across East Africa for 2 months, filming low-budget nature vlogs for his growing YouTube channel. His subscriber count hovered around 2,200, but he had cultivated a reputation for placing himself in remote environments with minimal preparation. His videos featured a loose, unpolished style that viewers found authentic. 1-minute intros, handheld walkthroughs, and long takes of him interacting with nature in unscripted, often reckless ways. Dylan's stated goal was to film what real wilderness feels like up close, but he had no formal background in biology or regional ecology. He trusted instinct and improvisation over expertise, a philosophy that would prove fatal in the predator-rich waters of Lake Victoria. What Dylan likely didn't understand was the ancient killing machine that ruled these waters. Nile crocodiles are deadly ambush predators, growing over 16 feet long and delivering bone-crushing bites over 3,000 psi before drowning their prey. Once they clamp onto prey, they employ the death roll, rapid spinning designed to disorient, dismember, and drown victims in seconds. That morning, Dylan had arrived in a fishing village near Entebbe and spent time talking with local children and fishermen. An older man gutting tilapia near his canoe had warned Dylan explicitly not to swim in the bay. He pointed toward the reeds and explained that crocodiles move through the area regularly, taking goats and sometimes children. Dylan laughed and waved off the concern, brushing it off with a casual, "It's just a rinse. Nothing's gonna grab me in waist-deep water." By 5 p.m., the light was soft enough for filming. Dylan positioned his camera just beyond the high water mark, preparing to shoot what he described as a bathing sequence inspired by local villagers. Shirtless and barefoot, he carried a bar of soap in a small bucket, intending to demonstrate how people washed in the lake. Unlike villagers, who typically stayed near the reeds or used enclosures, he stepped out farther alone for a better camera angle. 3 village boys watched from shore as he waded deeper into the murky water. The shallow edge of Lake Victoria slopes gently into dark, weed-choked depths where visibility drops to 0 beyond a few feet. This environment provides perfect hunting conditions for Nile crocodiles, allowing them to approach prey completely undetected. Dylan moved slowly through the water, adjusting his stance as he splashed his face for the camera. He kept glancing back at his tripod, gesturing with his left hand while narrating softly in his mixture of Spanish and broken English. The water around him appeared calm and harmless, giving no indication of the massive predator that had been tracking his movements since he first entered the lake. This was likely a mature male exceeding 12 feet, a size capable of attacking large mammals and even overturning dugout canoes. Then Dylan screamed. The sound was sharp and brief, a single high-pitched cry that transformed into a grunt as he was suddenly pulled backward and down. Water surged violently around him as a long tail and part of a broad back surfaced for less than a second before disappearing again. The crocodile clamped onto Dylan's right side just under the ribs, its massive jaws penetrating deep into his torso. The initial bite alone would have caused catastrophic internal damage, crushing ribs and puncturing vital organs. Dylan twisted once in the water, his body responding instinctively to the unimaginable pain, before the crocodile began its death roll. This spinning technique, perfected over millions of years of evolution, serves multiple purposes. It disorients prey, tears flesh from bone, and ensures drowning by keeping victims underwater. Dylan's arm reached above the surface briefly during the violent rotation, but he didn't scream again. The crocodile rolled with him in a wide arc before both predator and prey vanished beneath the surface. The camera, still recording from shore, captured the panicked voices rising as witnesses realized what was happening. One man waded in waist deep but saw nothing in the murky water. Another shouted to check farther down the reeds. But within a minute, an eerie silence had returned to the bay. Authorities called by the natives arrived at dusk to find Dylan's tripod and backpack abandoned on shore. His camera still powered on and recording. A review of the footage confirmed that the attack had occurred within seconds of Dylan turning toward shore, with no prior warning signs visible. No ripples, no fin, no surface breach. Just flat water, then sudden explosive violence. Dylan's body was found the next morning in papyrus reeds, legs missing from mid-thigh and his torso showing signs of massive trauma. Punctured ribs, crushed tissue, and deep tearing consistent with a crocodile's jaws. Remarkably, his face remained intact, preserving his identity for the grim task of repatriation. Local police marked the case an accidental death and filed a brief incident summary. Officials posted a handwritten sign near the bay warning of crocodile danger, but no patrols or removals followed. In this region, such attacks were uncommon but not unusual. The predator had acted on instinct and life moved on. Dylan's family in San Jose held a private funeral, requesting that footage of the attack not be circulated. His YouTube channel fell silent, a digital monument to the dangers of treating nature as entertainment rather than respecting it as the domain of perfectly evolved killers. No camera angle can prepare you for what rises silently from murky water, or crashes headlong through firelight in the dead of night. It was July 4th, 2014, and the Okefenokee swamp was alive with the sounds of summer. Cicadas buzzed in the cypress trees, frogs croaked from hidden pools, and somewhere in the distance, an alligator's deep bellow echoed across the dark water. The air was thick with humidity and the smell of decomposing vegetation, while Spanish moss draped from ancient trees like ghostly curtains. Tyler Brennan and his girlfriend Sarah had driven down from Atlanta to celebrate Independence Day with a camping trip in the swamp's remote backcountry. At 19, Tyler was fresh out of high school, full of confidence and eager to prove his manhood to the girl he'd been dating for 6 months. He was athletic, popular, and used to being the center of attention, the kind of young man who took risks to maintain his reputation. Sarah had initially been skeptical about Tyler's boasts of being able to catch an alligator with his bare hands. She'd seen the reality shows where people wrestled gators, but those were trained professionals with safety equipment and backup teams. Tyler had no such experience, just teenage bravado and a desire to impress her with increasingly dangerous stunts. Their campsite was located on a small island of dry ground surrounded by dark water and thick vegetation. The area was known to locals as a prime alligator habitat, especially during summer when females were protecting their nests. American alligators in the Okefenokee can reach lengths of 12 feet and weigh over 500 pounds. Females become extremely aggressive when protecting their nests, which they build in late spring and guard throughout the summer. An alligator's bite force can exceed 2,000 pounds per square inch, and their death roll, a spinning maneuver used to disorient and drown prey, is one of nature's most effective killing techniques. Tyler's confidence had been building all day. He'd successfully caught several smaller animals, a turtle, a snake, even a small fish with his bare hands. Each success made him bolder, and Sarah's initial skepticism had gradually turned to encouragement as she got caught up in the excitement. The couple had been exploring the water's edge when Tyler spotted what he thought was a large log floating about 20 feet from shore. The dark shape was perfectly still, partially submerged, with just the top visible above the waterline. To Tyler's inexperienced eye, it looked like the perfect opportunity to prove his skills. Tyler waded into the murky water, a makeshift noose held high above his head, his eyes fixed on the floating log. The water was warm and dark, with visibility limited to just a few inches below the surface. What Tyler had mistaken for a log was actually a 12-foot female alligator that had been floating motionless near her nest site. Tyler was within 10 feet of the alligator when she exploded from the water. The massive reptile launched herself upward with incredible force, her jaws opening wide to reveal rows of razor-sharp teeth. Tyler had just enough time to register his mistake before 500 pounds of prehistoric fury slammed into his torso. The alligator's jaws clamped down on Tyler's midsection with crushing force, her teeth penetrating deep into his abdomen and back. Tyler screamed as ribs cracked and internal organs compressed under the tremendous pressure. The alligator immediately began her death roll, spinning rapidly in the water while maintaining her grip on Tyler's body. As the alligator spun, Tyler's body was twisted and torn, his spine compressed and organs ruptured by the violent motion. The murky water turned red with blood as Tyler was dragged under the surface, his screams cut short by the dark water filling his lungs. The alligator continued her death roll for nearly a minute before releasing Tyler's mangled body and disappearing beneath the surface. An investigation by Georgia wildlife officials ruled Tyler's death an accident caused by reckless behavior in the known dangerous area. No charges were filed, but the incident prompted additional warning signs and increased patrols in popular camping areas. Sarah required counseling to deal with the trauma of witnessing the attack. Tyler's funeral drew hundreds of his high school classmates and teammates, who remembered him as a fun-loving young man whose confidence had ultimately cost him his life. His parents established a scholarship fund in his memory and became advocates for wildlife safety education. It was May 2nd, 2022, when Cheryl Ann Braddock pulled her silver Honda Accord into the gravel parking area along Loop Road in Big Cypress National Preserve. The 67-year-old recently retired school principal had decided to spend her newfound freedom exploring the wild heart of the Everglades, something she'd promised herself for decades while managing unruly students in Naples. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the sawgrass prairie, and the air hung thick with humidity and the earthy scent of decomposing vegetation. Cypress trees draped in Spanish moss lined the dark canal that ran parallel to the road, their gnarled roots disappearing into water the color of black tea. Multiple yellow warning signs dotted the area, their bold letters proclaiming, "Danger alligators," in both English and Spanish. But Cheryl Ann barely glanced at them as she opened her car door and released her energetic Cocker Spaniel, Rusty. She had driven this route countless times during her teaching career, taking weekend trips to clear her mind from the stress of administrative duties. The American alligator is one of nature's most successful predators, having survived virtually unchanged for over 200 million years. These apex predators can grow up to 14 feet in length and weigh over 1,000 pounds, with females typically reaching 8 to 10 feet. Their powerful jaws contain 74 to 80 razor-sharp teeth designed for gripping rather than chewing, capable of exerting bite forces exceeding 2,900 pounds per square inch. During nesting season from April through July, female alligators become extremely territorial and aggressive, defending their nests with lethal determination. They construct their nests from vegetation and mud near water sources, remaining vigilant guardians until their young hatch. These prehistoric survivors can remain motionless for hours, perfectly camouflaged in murky water, waiting for the perfect moment to strike unsuspecting prey. Cheryl Ann walked confidently toward the canal's edge, her years of authority as an educator having instilled in her an unwavering belief in her own judgment. Rusty bounded ahead, his leash dragging behind him as he sniffed excitedly at the water's edge. A lone fisherman casting his line from a nearby bridge called out a warning, suggesting she keep her distance from the water and control her dog. Cheryl Ann turned sharply, her voice carrying the same stern voice she had used to discipline countless students over her 40-year career, declaring that her lifelong Florida residency made her perfectly capable of assessing the situation. Her dismissive attitude reflected decades of being the final authority in every room she entered. The attack came without warning. As Cheryl Ann bent down to retrieve Rusty's leash, an 8-foot female alligator exploded from the murky shadows with terrifying speed. The massive reptile's jaws clamped down on Cheryl Ann's right leg just below the knee, her bone audibly cracking under the tremendous pressure. The alligator's teeth punctured through her skin and muscle tissue, creating deep lacerations that immediately began bleeding profusely. Cheryl Ann's scream pierced the humid air as she instinctively tried to pull away, but the alligator's grip only tightened. The predator's prehistoric instincts had been triggered by the perceived threat to her nearby nest, hidden among the cattails just 20 feet from where Cheryl Ann stood. The predator then executed its signature death roll, a violent spinning motion designed to disorient prey and cause massive trauma. Cheryl Ann was yanked off her feet and dragged toward the deeper water, her body tumbling helplessly as the alligator rotated with mechanical precision. The spinning motion tore her leg muscles and caused severe internal injuries as she was pulled beneath the surface. Water filled her lungs as she struggled desperately, but the alligator's relentless grip and the disorienting rotation made escape impossible. The death roll continued for nearly a minute before the alligator dragged her lifeless body toward a submerged culvert, where it would typically cache its prey for later consumption. Rusty fled into the surrounding vegetation, his terrified barking echoing across the preserve. The fisherman immediately dialed 911, his hands shaking as he described the horrific scene. Search and rescue teams arrived within 30 minutes. But Cheryl Ann's body wasn't recovered until 4 hours later, found partially submerged near the concrete culvert where the alligator had deposited her. Wildlife officials confirmed that the attacking alligator was a nesting female defending her territory during the peak of the breeding season. The investigation revealed that Cheryl Ann had unknowingly approached the critical defensive zone that triggers maternal aggression in nesting alligators. The incident prompted renewed calls for stricter enforcement of wildlife safety regulations in the Everglades. Cheryl Ann's sister released a brief statement asking for privacy during their time of grief, while acknowledging that her sister had always been headstrong and independent to a fault. The Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission launched an investigation into the attack, ultimately determining that the alligator had acted according to its natural defensive instincts. Local park rangers increased patrols along Loop Road and installed additional warning signage. The tragic event served as a stark reminder that even lifelong Florida residents can underestimate the deadly power of the state's apex predators. It was August 22, 2015, when the humid air of Everglades National Park hung thick over the maze of sawgrass and dark water channels. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the wetlands, where ancient cypress trees draped in Spanish moss created a cathedral of wilderness. Officer Caleb Thorne, a 28-year-old Marine Patrol officer with 5 years of experience navigating these treacherous waters, found himself deep in restricted breeding territory alongside his partner, Officer Jake Morrison. They had received reports of illegal airboat activity in the area, a serious violation during the critical nesting season when protective alligators became increasingly territorial. Thorne was known among his colleagues for his methodical approach to investigations, though his willingness to take calculated risks sometimes concerned his supervisors. The remote location they patrolled was prime alligator habitat, where massive bulls guarded their nests with deadly precision during the height of the mating season. The water temperature had reached optimal levels for alligator activity, making every shadow beneath the surface a potential threat. Recent rainfall had raised water levels throughout the park, creating ideal conditions for the reptiles to expand their hunting grounds into previously safe, shallow areas. The American alligator, apex predator of the Everglades, can grow up to 14 feet in length and weigh over 1,000 pounds. These prehistoric reptiles possess one of the strongest bite forces in the animal kingdom, capable of exerting almost 3,000 pounds per square inch of pressure. During breeding season, male alligators become extremely aggressive, defending territories that can span several acres of wetland. Their powerful tails serve as both propulsion and weapons, while their armored bodies allow them to remain nearly invisible beneath the murky surface until the moment they strike. These ancient predators can hold their breath for up to 24 hours and strike with lightning speed from complete stillness. Their eyes and nostrils positioned on the top of their skulls allow them to remain almost completely submerged while monitoring their territory for any potential threats or prey. As the officers approached a suspicious airboat concealed within tall sawgrass near a known nesting area, their patrol boat's engine began sputtering and eventually died. Morrison immediately began troubleshooting the mechanical failure, while Thorne assessed their communication equipment, which had been damaged during recent storm activity and was now completely non-functional. Rather than abort the mission and risk losing the illegal operators, Thorne made the fatal decision to investigate the hidden vessel alone. He stepped into the shallow water, which reached his mid-thigh, and began wading through the murky channels toward the abandoned airboat approximately 50 yards away. The water felt unusually warm against his legs. Small ripples indicated movement beneath the surface that he attributed to fish activity. Thorne moved carefully through the dense vegetation, unaware that his splashing footsteps were creating vibrations that alerted every predator in the vicinity to his presence. The water around Thorne suddenly erupted as a massive 12-foot bull alligator launched itself from the depths with explosive force. The reptile's powerful jaws clamped down on Thorne's left leg just above the knee, its razor-sharp teeth penetrating through his uniform and deep into muscle and bone. The alligator immediately initiated its signature death roll, spinning violently in the water while maintaining its crushing grip. Thorne's body was whipped through the air and slammed repeatedly against the water's surface as the predator attempted to disorient and drown its prey. The officer fought desperately, striking the alligator's sensitive eyes and snout with his fists while screaming for Morrison to help. After what seemed like an eternity, the alligator released its grip, allowing Thorne to surface and gasp for air. Blood poured from the massive puncture wounds in his leg as he attempted to reach the safety of shallow water near the patrol boat. However, the severe trauma had already begun taking its toll, and his movements became increasingly sluggish. The alligator, still defending its nearby nest, attacked again with renewed fury. This time, its jaws found Thorne's upper thigh, severing the femoral artery in a catastrophic injury that sent torrents of blood into the dark water. Morrison, having heard his partner's screams, arrived with his service weapon and fired multiple rounds at the massive reptile, finally driving it back into the depths where it disappeared into the murky darkness. Despite Morrison's immediate first aid efforts and desperate radio calls for emergency evacuation, Thorne succumbed to massive blood loss and traumatic shock within 15 minutes of the initial attack. The Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission launched a comprehensive investigation into the incident, ultimately determining that the officers had followed proper protocols despite the tragic outcome. The investigation revealed that the illegal airboat operators have been using the area for weeks, unknowingly disturbing critical nesting sites and increasing aggressive behavior among the local alligator population. It was May 30th, 2016, the Florida sun beating down mercilessly on the murky waters of Everglades National Park. The holiday crowds had begun to thin as temperatures soared, but the airboat tours continued their regular schedule, ferrying tourists through the ancient waterways where danger lurked just beneath the deceptively calm surface. Rico Mendez was a 26-year-old transmission specialist from Hialeah, Florida, known among his co-workers for his boisterous laugh and reflexive disregard for posted warnings. This spontaneous trip to the Everglades with two friends from the garage was nothing more than a casual day off, an opportunity for laughs and social media content. To Rico, the Everglades weren't a wild ecosystem demanding respect. They were simply background scenery for good selfies and bigger stories to tell later. The group boarded the airboat around 11:15 a.m., just as the sun began to hammer down with full force. Rico immediately made jokes about how gators were just slow swamp dogs, dismissing the very real danger that surrounded them. As their boat glided through shallow channels lined with cypress and sawgrass, the guide cut their engine near a slough, a slow-moving section of open water where alligators often congregate. American alligators have remained largely unchanged for over 200 million years. They can reach 13 feet in length, weigh up to 1,000 pounds, and deliver a bite force of 2,125 psi, enough to crush bone. As ambush predators, they launch from the water at over 20 miles per hour and use a violent death roll to tear prey apart. The guide gave his usual warning: don't feed the wildlife or lean over the rails. The animals weren't pets. They linked boats to food and could get aggressive. Rico, as always, ignored it. Despite the explicit instructions, Rico began tossing strips of beef jerky into the water while his friends laughed and recorded video. A dark shape appeared, hovering just feet from the boat's edge. A massive alligator, roughly 12 feet long, rose slowly from the depths, its prehistoric eyes fixed on the source of food. The guide shouted frantically for Rico to stop, but Rico was already squatting near the edge with his phone, grinning as he gestured for someone to take his picture. Then disaster struck with terrifying swiftness. Rico's foot slipped on the damp aluminum deck, still slick from spray. He pitched forward, arms first, then chest, into the murky water with a loud splash. The alligator reacted with the lightning-fast reflexes of a predator that had perfected its hunting technique over millions of years. The massive reptile lunged with jaws wide, clamping around Rico's torso with a brutal snap that fractured ribs instantly. Blood erupted into the water as Rico's friends desperately lunged for his legs, managing to grab his jeans briefly before the gator initiated its signature death roll. The violent spinning motion broke their grip immediately, and Rico disappeared beneath the surface in a churning vortex of blood and foam. Screams erupted across the airboat as the guide radioed for emergency response. More blood surfaced briefly, then the water returned to its deceptive calm, as if nothing had happened. Park rangers arrived within the hour, accompanied by officers from Florida Fish and Wildlife. Search divers equipped with protective gear and rifles combed the area with extreme caution. 3 hours later, they located Rico's remains near a submerged log. His body had been catastrophically damaged, missing the right arm and most of the left leg. Drag marks in the silt suggested the alligator had partially cached him for later consumption, a natural behavior that demonstrates these predators' methodical approach to feeding. The responsible alligator, a large male, was captured that evening and euthanized the following morning. Officials classified the incident as a food-conditioned fatality, a tragic but predictable result of human interference with natural predator behavior. Rico's funeral took place 5 days later at St. Monica Parish in Hialeah. The service was brief and sparsely attended. The airboat company faced no charges, but implemented new safety protocols and upgraded warning signage. A brief segment aired on local evening news under Holiday Tragedy, featuring stock alligator footage and images of the airboat dock. By the weekend, the story had been forgotten, replaced by other news. It was July 27, 2017, and the Florida Everglades shimmered under the brutal summer sun like a vast green mirror. The temperature had already climbed past 90 degrees by mid-morning, and the humidity made the air feel thick enough to swim through. This was the heart of one of America's most unique and dangerous ecosystems, where sawgrass prairies stretched endlessly toward the horizon, and dark water channels wound through cypress hammocks like liquid shadows. Warren Elkins had been retired for just 6 months, and he was determined to make the most of his newfound freedom. The 67-year-old former civil engineer from Ohio had spent 40 years designing bridges and highways, but his true passion had always been photography. He'd recently joined an online wildlife photography forum where members shared tips, locations, and their most spectacular shots. The forum had been buzzing about the Everglades, with several photographers posting stunning images of alligators, birds, and other wildlife. The Everglades ecosystem is built around water, a slow-moving river of grass that flows from Lake Okeechobee to Florida Bay. During summer months, water levels drop significantly, concentrating wildlife around remaining pools and channels. This creates exceptional opportunities for wildlife viewing, but it also increases danger as predators become more territorial and aggressive while competing for limited resources. American alligators are perfectly adapted killing machines, capable of reaching lengths of 14 feet and weights exceeding 1,000 pounds. Their powerful jaws can snap shut with a force of almost 3,000 pounds per square inch, enough to crush a turtle shell or break human bones like twigs. They're ambush predators that can remain motionless for hours before exploding into action, capable of launching themselves completely out of the water to catch prey. Warren had driven down from his winter home in Tampa armed with a new digital camera and determination to capture the perfect alligator photograph. He'd spent hours studying online tutorials and forum posts, learning about the best locations and techniques for wildlife photography in the Everglades. His plan was simple: find a large alligator sunning itself on the bank, set up his tripod at a safe distance, and capture the kind of dramatic close-up that would earn respect from his online photography community. He'd been walking along the canal for about an hour when he spotted what appeared to be the perfect subject: a massive alligator at least 10 feet long, lying motionless on the opposite bank about 50 yards away. Warren found a section where the fence had been damaged by recent storms, creating a gap just wide enough for a person to squeeze through. He made his way carefully toward the canal's edge, setting up his tripod about 20 feet from the water. The alligator across the canal remained motionless, and Warren began taking photos, adjusting his settings and composition. But he wasn't satisfied with the angle. He needed to get lower, closer to the water level, to create the dramatic perspective he was envisioning. What Warren didn't realize was that a second alligator had been lying submerged in the canal just a few feet away from where he was setting up his equipment. The murky water provided perfect camouflage, and the alligator had been monitoring the unusual activity on the bank with growing interest. Warren was adjusting his tripod legs and preparing to take a selfie with the distant alligator in the background when a hidden predator struck. The 12-foot alligator exploded from the water with shocking speed and power, its massive jaws opening wide as it launched itself toward the crouching photographer. The alligator's jaws clamped down on Warren's right leg just above the knee, its 68 razor-sharp teeth penetrating deep into muscle and bone. The force of the bite shattered his femur and severed major arteries, causing immediate and massive blood loss. Warren screamed and fell backward, but the alligator maintained its grip and began its characteristic death roll, spinning rapidly in the water to disorient prey and tear away large chunks of flesh. The death roll dragged Warren into the canal, where the alligator's home field advantage became overwhelming. In the murky water, Warren couldn't see or breathe, and the alligator's powerful tail and body prevented any chance of escape. The predator's jaws released and repositioned several times, each bite targeting different parts of Warren's body as the attack continued. A group of tourists on the nearby boardwalk heard Warren's initial scream and saw the violent thrashing in the water. They immediately called 911 while trying to locate the source of the disturbance. By the time park rangers arrived with emergency equipment, the water had returned to its deceptively calm state. Rescue divers entered the water with extreme caution, using poles and hooks to search the murky canal bottom. Warren's body was recovered 3 hours later, approximately 50 yards downstream from where the attack had occurred. The medical examiner determined that Warren had died from massive trauma and blood loss caused by multiple alligator bites. Park officials used the incident to reinforce safety messaging and increase enforcement of restricted area boundaries. New fencing was installed along popular photography locations, and warning signs were updated with more graphic language about the dangers of approaching alligators. September 2nd, 2015 began like any other day of adventure for the Kingsley family. Laura Kingsley, a 39-year-old primary school teacher from Melbourne, had always been the practical one in her marriage. With her methodical approach to lesson planning and her natural instinct to care for others, she had organized every detail of their overland safari adventure through South Africa. The mother of 2 teenagers had spent months researching their route, reading travel forums, and preparing emergency kits. Her colleagues at Riverside Primary School knew her as someone who never left anything to chance. Her students adored her gentle but firm teaching style, and parents trusted her completely during school camping excursions. By the time they reached Kruger's gates, the sun was already painting the horizon in shades of orange and red. The main rest camps were fully booked, forcing them to accept accommodation at Lower Sabi, one of the smaller camps situated directly on the banks of the Sabi River. The camp's proximity to water meant increased wildlife activity, something the booking agent had mentioned but Laura had dismissed. After dinner, Laura gathered the dirty dishes and utensils to wash them at the communal washing. The washing area was located close to the perimeter fence, where the sound of the river was strongest. The washing facility was positioned unfortunately close to a section of fence that had been damaged earlier that day by a fallen tree branch. Camp maintenance had cordoned off the area but hadn't yet completed repairs, leaving a gap just large enough for a determined predator to exploit. Laura, focused on her task, failed to notice the warning tape that had partially fallen away from the damaged fence section. As Laura bent over the washing basin with her back to the river, the damaged fence section erupted in an explosion of water, mud, and scales. A massive Nile crocodile, over 14 feet long and weighing nearly 1,000 pounds, had been lying motionless in the shallow for hours, drawn by the scent of food waste and the regular human activity near the water's edge. The crocodile's initial strike was a masterpiece of predatory precision. Its massive jaws, capable of exerting over 3,000 pounds of pressure per square inch, clamped down on Laura's torso with bone-crushing force. Her scream pierced the night air and sent every animal within a mile radius into panicked silence. Laura's husband heard the scream and the distinctive splash of something massive entering the water. He ran toward the washing facility. What he found was a scene from a nightmare. Overturned washing basins, Laura's sandals scattered across wet concrete, and a trail of disturbed mud leading directly to the gap in the fence. The crocodile had executed its attack. After the initial bite, it had immediately begun dragging Laura toward deeper water, using its powerful tail and legs to propel both predator and victim through the gap in the fence. Other campers, alerted by the husband's desperate screams for help, arrived to find him standing waist-deep in the water, frantically sweeping with his flashlight beam. The river had returned to its deceptive calm, showing no sign of the violence that had just occurred beneath its surface. Camp security arrived within minutes, but their powerful spotlights revealed only disturbed sediment and the occasional bubble rising from the depths where the crocodile had taken its victim. The search and rescue operation that followed was one of the most extensive in Kruger history. Professional divers, despite the extreme danger posed by other crocodiles in the area, spent 3 days exploring the underwater caves and fallen trees where Nile crocodiles typically cache their prey. The river's murky water and strong current made the search nearly impossible. with visibility limited to mere inches, even with underwater lighting equipment. Laura's body was finally recovered 4 days later, nearly 6 miles downstream, caught in a tangle of fallen trees where the current had deposited it. The condition of her remains told the story of her final moments. The tragedy led to immediate and comprehensive changes throughout Kruger's camp system. The damaged fence at Lower Sabi was replaced with a double barrier system, motion sensor lighting was installed in all washing facilities, and new protocols require camp maintenance to immediately repair any fence damage regardless of the hour. Laura's family returned to Australia forever changed. It was April 9th, 2018 when the humid Louisiana air hung thick over the Audubon Zoo in New Orleans. The sprawling 58-acre facility sat nestled in the heart of Uptown, its ancient oak trees draped in Spanish moss, creating an eerie canopy over the darkened pathways. The zoo had closed hours earlier, leaving only the distant sounds of nocturnal animals and the gentle lapping of water against concrete barriers in the Louisiana Swamp exhibit. Maxwell Max Edens had been living out of his rusted Honda Civic for 3 months, drifting through the Gulf Coast states with nothing but a weathered leather journal and an obsession that had cost him everything. The 31-year-old had once been a promising herpetology student at Louisiana State University, until his unconventional theories about reptilian communication led to his dismissal from the program. His professors had grown concerned when Max began claiming he could sense the emotional states of alligators and snakes through what he called primal frequency reading. Since leaving academia, Max had been documenting his encounters with reptiles across the South, convinced he was gathering material for a groundbreaking book about human-reptile connections. His journal contained detailed sketches and rambling notes about unspoken bonds and ancient communication methods. He had spent the previous week camping in City Park, studying the zoo's layout and researching their reptile collection online. That evening, Max had discovered what he believed was crucial information buried in a 5-year-old blog post claiming that zoo alligators were routinely tranquilized during overnight hours for safety maintenance. The outdated and completely false information became the foundation for his most dangerous assumption yet. The American alligator represents one of nature's most perfectly evolved predators, unchanged for over 200 million years. These apex hunters can grow up to 14 feet in length and possess one of the strongest bite forces in the animal kingdom, measuring over 2,980 pounds per square inch. Their muscular tails serve as powerful propulsion systems underwater, while their eyes and nostrils remain positioned on top of their skulls, allowing them to remain nearly invisible while hunting. Alligators are opportunistic feeders with lightning-fast reflexes, capable of launching their entire body out of the water in explosive bursts of speed, reaching up to 35 miles per hour. Max had scaled the perimeter fence near the Louisiana Swamp exhibit just after midnight, his bare feet making soft contact with the wooden boardwalk that wound through the recreated wetland habitat. The exhibit housed several American alligators in a naturalistic environment complete with cypress trees, native vegetation, and a murky lagoon designed to mimic the Atchafalaya Basin. Max removed his shoes and socks, rolling up his pants as he prepared to enter what he believed was a safe environment filled with sedated animals. The water felt warm against his ankles as he waded deeper into the lagoon, his journal held high above his head. The 10-foot male alligator had been resting motionless near a submerged log, perfectly camouflaged in the dark water, with only his eyes and nostrils visible above the surface. Max continued forward, now waist-deep, completely unaware that he had triggered the predator's hunting instincts by creating vibrations and movement patterns identical to those of natural prey. The attack came without warning. The massive alligator exploded from the water with devastating force, its powerful jaws clamping down on Max's torso just below his rib cage. The crushing bite force immediately fractured multiple ribs and punctured his lung, while the alligator's razor-sharp teeth penetrated deep into his abdomen. Max's journal flew from his hands as the predator's death roll began, the signature hunting technique that involves rapid spinning to disorient prey and cause massive tissue damage. The alligator's powerful tail drove them both underwater as it continued the violent rotation, each turn tearing through muscle and organs while Max's body went limp from shock and blood loss. The murky water turned dark as the predator's instincts took over, dragging its prey toward the deeper section of the lagoon where it could properly subdue and consume the meal. Within minutes, Max's body had been completely dismembered by the alligator's methodical feeding behavior, his remains disappearing into the depths of the artificial swamp. Zoo security discovered the breach the following morning, when they found Max's abandoned shoes and scattered pages from his journal along the boardwalk. The Louisiana Swamp exhibit was immediately closed as authorities launched a comprehensive search of the facility. Wildlife officials used specialized equipment to capture the 10-foot male alligator, and a subsequent necropsy revealed human remains in the animal's stomach, confirming the tragic outcome. The Audubon Zoo released a statement emphasizing its commitment to visitor safety while expressing condolences to Max's family. His sister traveled from Oregon to New Orleans, describing Max as a troubled but passionate individual who had lost his way after leaving university. The zoo implemented additional overnight security measures and reinforced all perimeter barriers following the incident. The captured alligator was euthanized according to standard protocol, though wildlife experts noted that the animal had simply followed its natural predatory instincts when presented with what it perceived as prey in its territory. It was May 7, 2016, the Florida sun casting long shadows across the Valencia Greens golf course as Glenn Perro made his final walk. The 72-year-old widower from upstate New York had moved to the villages 9 months earlier, seeking the peace and sunshine that had eluded him after his wife's passing. What he found instead was his own tragic end in the murky waters of a retention pond. Glenn was known throughout his neighborhood as a friendly but stubborn man who had little patience for what he called Florida rules. His evening walks had become routine, shortcuts through the golf course rather than the designated cart paths, dismissive waves at maintenance staff who warned him about wildlife, and a general disdain for the yellow caution tape and warning signs that sprout like weeds after every rainstorm. That evening, recent rainfall had caused the retention pond near the 8th hole to overflow, creating the perfect conditions for an alligator to venture beyond its usual territory. The standing water mixed with runoff containing fish waste and organic matter would have attracted the predator's attention. It was a recipe for something to go horribly wrong. Spring in Florida marks the beginning of alligator mating season, when males become increasingly territorial and aggressive, expanding their range in search of mates and new hunting grounds. Adult males can reach lengths of 14 feet and weigh over 1,000 pounds. Their bite force measures an astounding 2,980 pounds per square inch, enough to crush a turtle shell or snap a human femur like a twig. Glenn stepped over the barrier chain and yellow caution tape at 7:15 p.m., picked up by security footage around the area. His shoes splashed through the ankle-deep floodwater as he took the shortcut, completely unaware that he was being watched. A greenskeeper loading tools onto his maintenance cart spotted Glenn across the flooded area. He was about to call out a warning when something near the grass line caught his attention. A shape that had been perfectly still, now drifting slightly with the current. The 10-foot male alligator had been lying in wait, using a hunting strategy perfected over millennia. The attack came without warning. The massive reptile launched from the brush with explosive force, its powerful tail propelling it through the water faster than Glenn could react. The alligator's jaws clamped onto Glenn's right leg with devastating precision. The initial bite crushed bone instantly, the sound audible to the greenskeeper from 50 yards away. What followed was the alligator's signature killing technique, the death roll. The spinning maneuver used to disorient prey and tear away chunks of flesh is one of nature's most efficient killing methods. Glenn was yanked off his feet and dragged into the deeper section of the pond. His evening walk transformed into a nightmare in seconds. The greenskeeper shouted and ran toward the water's edge, but the distance and his own safety concerns prevented any rescue attempt, so he phoned for help. He said he saw Glenn surface once, his arms thrashing, before the alligator's powerful jaws pulled him under for the final time. The entire struggle lasted less than 15 seconds. Emergency responders arrived within minutes of the 911 call, but the pond had already returned to its calm. Dive teams worked through the night, their underwater lights cutting through the murky water as they searched for Glenn's remains. Recovery divers located Glenn's body the following morning, wedged against the concrete drainage inlet where the current had carried him. The injuries were catastrophic. The alligator's initial bite had shattered his femur and caused massive blood loss, but the official cause of death was drowning. The predator responsible was captured hours later using baited hooks. Following standard protocol for alligators involved in human fatalities, it was euthanized by wildlife officers. The investigation revealed that Glenn had walked past multiple warning signs, stepped over barrier chains, and ignored verbal warnings from maintenance staff. The retention pond had been clearly marked as a wildlife zone, with signs posted in both English and Spanish warning of alligator danger. Some residents called for stricter penalties for ignoring closures, while others argued that extensive restrictions infringed on their freedom. But for those who knew Glenn personally, it was simply a tragic end to a familiar pattern. A stubborn man who believed rules were suggestions, until one proved fatal. It was May 3, 2014 in Botswana. The morning sun cast golden reflections across the pristine channels of the Okavango Delta, where crystal-clear waters wound through papyrus beds and scattered islands of palm trees. This UNESCO World Heritage Site, spanning over 15,000 square kilometers of wetlands, served as a lifeline for countless species in the heart of the Kalahari Desert. The delta's intricate network of waterways created a maze of channels, some deep enough for motorboats, others barely navigable by Mokoro dugout canoes. Trevor Boone, a 34-year-old environmental science graduate from Denver, Colorado, had arrived with his wife Marie to document aquatic ecosystems for their conservation blog, Water Voices. Trevor worked as a water quality analyst for the city of Denver, bringing a methodical, scientific approach to everything he encountered. His colleagues knew him as someone who questioned conventional wisdom, often conducting his own research rather than accepting standard protocols. Marie, a freelance photographer, had grown accustomed to Trevor's tendency to challenge established guidelines, viewing it as part of his passionate commitment to environmental truth. The couple had chosen the Okavango specifically because Trevor believed mainstream wildlife documentaries sensationalized the dangers of African waterways. He wanted to present a more balanced perspective, showing how humans could coexist respectively with aquatic wildlife. Their local guide had recommended staying on the main channels during their 3-day kayaking expedition, explaining that side channels often harbored territorial animals during breeding season. Trevor, however, had studied satellite imagery and water flow patterns, convinced that the narrower tributaries would offer better wildlife observation opportunities without the tourist theater of guided routes. The Nile crocodile represents one of Africa's most formidable predators, reaching lengths of up to 20 feet and weighing over 1,500 pounds. These ancient reptiles have remained virtually unchanged for 200 million years, perfectly adapted for aquatic ambush hunting. Their powerful jaws generate a bite force of 5,000 pounds per square inch, capable of crushing bones instantly. Nile crocodiles are opportunistic hunters, lying motionless beneath the water's surface for hours, using only their eyes and nostrils exposed above the waterline. During May, the beginning of Botswana's dry season, crocodiles concentrate in deeper pools and channels as water levels recede. making them more territorial and aggressive. On their second day, Trevor convinced Marie to explore a narrow side channel he had identified on his maps. The waterway appeared calm, bordered by dense reed beds that created natural corridors perfect for wildlife photography. Trevor paddled confidently in the lead kayak, his yellow vessel cutting through water barely 3 feet deep. Marie followed 20 yards behind, camera ready to capture the undisturbed ecosystem Trevor promised they would find. The attack occurred without warning in a shallow bend where the channel narrowed to less than 15 feet across. A massive Nile crocodile, measuring approximately 16 feet in length, had been lying motionless in the muddy bottom, camouflaged among fallen logs and vegetation. The reptile had likely been using this hunting ground for years, as evidenced by scattered bones along the shoreline that Trevor had mistaken for natural debris. The crocodile struck from directly below Trevor's kayak with explosive force, its massive tail propelling its body upward through the water column. The initial impact lifted the entire kayak 3 feet into the air, the fiberglass hull cracking audibly as the crocodile's jaws clamped down on Trevor's torso just below his life jacket. The predator's teeth, each measuring up to 3 inches long, penetrated through his ribs and into his chest cavity, puncturing both lungs instantly. Trevor's body disappeared beneath the surface as the crocodile executed its signature death roll, a spinning maneuver designed to disorient prey and cause massive internal trauma. The rotation generated tremendous torque, fracturing Trevor's spine at multiple points, while the crocodile's grip crushed his rib cage. Water rushed into his punctured lungs as the spinning continued, each revolution driving the teeth deeper into his organs. The death roll lasted approximately 30 seconds, during which Trevor's body was twisted and compressed beyond survival. Marie's screams echoed across the delta as she witnessed her husband vanish into the churning water. The crocodile surfaced briefly, Trevor's motionless form still clamped in its jaws, before submerging again to secure its prey in an underwater cache. Park rangers who had been monitoring radio communications reached the scene within 40 minutes. They recovered Trevor's body 3 hours later using specialized equipment, finding it wedged beneath a submerged log where the crocodile had stored it. The Botswana Department of Wildlife and National Parks launched an investigation into the incident, ultimately determining that Trevor had entered a restricted area during peak territorial season. The specific channel where the attack occurred was subsequently marked with permanent warning buoys. Marie, on the other hand, continued their conservation work with a renewed focus on respecting traditional wildlife management practices. The tragedy highlighted the critical importance of local expertise in navigating Africa's waterways, where ancient predators continue to rule territories they've occupied for millennia. While Trevor's passion for conservation was admirable, his fatal decision to ignore indigenous knowledge proved that even the most well-intentioned environmental advocates must respect the wisdom of those who understand these ecosystems intimately. It was July 20th, 2022 when the air hung thick and oppressive over central Florida's Lake Hachanilla. The backyard barbecue at the Henderson's lakeside property had been winding down for hours, but the combination of beer, old grudges, and summer heat had transformed what should have been a peaceful gathering into something far more volatile. At the center of the brewing storm stood Zach Renner, his face flushed red from alcohol and humiliation. Zach was a 29-year-old construction worker from Kissimmee, known among his circle for his impulsive decisions and inflated sense of his own capabilities. His social media showed a pattern of escalating stunts, leaping off overpasses, wrestling pit bulls, even grabbing a rattlesnake barehanded. Raised by a hard-working single father who prized toughness and rarely intervened, Zach learned early on that attention, even through dumb recklessness, was its own kind of validation. The evening had started pleasantly enough, with grilled burgers and cold beers flowing freely among the dozen or so friends gathered on the Henderson's dock. But as the sun set and inhibitions lowered, old tensions began to surface. The breaking point came when Zach's girlfriend of 2 years, Jessica, announced in front of everyone that she was done with his childish crap and walked away, leaving him standing alone by the water's edge. The humiliation was too much for Zach's fragile ego to bear. His friends watched as his face cycled through embarrassment, anger, and finally a dangerous kind of determination. Earlier in the evening, someone had mentioned spotting what looked like a large alligator near the boat ramp, but the sighting had been dismissed as probably just a log or debris. Zach shouted, slurring slightly as he pointed toward the dark water, that he was going to find the gator and ride it like a cowboy. He said he'd show everyone what a real man looked like. To him, it was a stunt for laughs and bragging rights. To everyone else, it was another reminder that Zach never understood where confidence ended and stupidity began. His friends initially laughed, assuming it was just drunken bravado, but as Zach began stripping off his shirt and stumbling toward the water's edge, their amusement turned to alarm. Several people called out for him to stop, but Zach was beyond reason, driven by a toxic combination of alcohol, wounded pride, and the need to prove something to people who were no longer paying attention. Thinking before acting had never been his strong suit. What Zach didn't know was that local anglers had recently reported an unusually large male alligator, estimated at 11 feet long, prowling this particular stretch of Lake Hachanina. Wildlife officials suspected the animal had been pushed into the narrower bay by territorial disputes with other males during mating season. American alligators are ancient predators, with instincts honed over millions of years. Adult males can grow up to 14 feet long and weigh over 1,000 pounds, delivering a bite strong enough to crush a bowling ball. Their 80 razor-sharp teeth form a grip that, once locked, is almost impossible to escape. As Zach moved deeper, the water rose to his chest, the soft, uneven lake bottom slowing his steps. He slapped the surface and shouted taunts, unaware of the danger. His friends watched in uneasy silence, some filming, hoping it was just another stunt. Little did they know, something beneath the surface had already begun to shift. The alligator had been likely watching from the moment Zach entered the water. Concealed among the reeds just 20 feet away, the massive reptile remained perfectly still, only its eyes and nostrils breaking the surface. To the predator, Zach's splashing and shouting weren't intimidating, they were an announcement of prey in distress. The attack came without warning. One moment Zach was chest deep in the murky water, still yelling taunts at the darkness. The next, the surface exploded as nearly half a ton of prehistoric predator surged forward with devastating speed. The alligator's massive jaws clamped around Zach's midsection with bone-crushing force, the impact audible even over his single terrified scream. What followed was a textbook death roll, the alligator's signature killing technique. The massive reptile spun rapidly in the water, using its entire body weight to disorient its prey and cause massive internal trauma. The water around them erupted in a violent whirlpool of foam and red, as Zach's body was twisted and torn by forces no human could survive. Chaos broke out on the dock. Jessica screamed and collapsed as others shouted Zach's name into the silent water. One guy stepped in to help but froze when the alligator surfaced, Zach's limp body in its jaws before vanishing into deeper water. All they could do was call for help. Emergency services arrived within the hour, but everyone knew it was a recovery operation, not a rescue. The lake was immediately closed to the public while wildlife officials began the grim task of locating both the victim and the predator responsible. The alligator was found and euthanized the following day, its stomach contents confirming what everyone already knew. Zach's remains, what could be recovered, were returned to his family for burial. The incident made local news, with a few outlets treating it as another example of Florida man's stupidity. In the days following the attack, Florida Fish and Wildlife officials closed off access to the lake and posted new warning signs around the perimeter. They also launched a community outreach campaign on the dangers of feeding or approaching wild alligators, emphasizing how quickly such behavior can lead to fatal outcomes. It was May 18, 2017, and the Florida Everglades shimmered under an oppressive afternoon sun. The air was thick with humidity and the buzz of insects, while Spanish moss draped from cypress trees like tattered curtains. In the shallow waters of Lokahatchee Wildlife Refuge, the boundary between land and water blurred into a maze of sawgrass and hidden channels where danger lurked just beneath the surface. Brielle Sutton had convinced 3 classmates to join her for a post-exam celebration in the wetlands. At 16, she was known at school as the quiet nature lover who ran a modest Instagram account focused on Florida's endangered ecosystems. Her post rarely got more than a few dozen likes, but she was passionate about wildlife photography and often ventured off-mark trails to capture unique compositions. Recent viral success with a photo of a rare bird had emboldened her to take more creative risks. The group had spent the morning on the designated boardwalk, taking typical tourist photos and complaining about the heat. But Brielle was restless, scanning the landscape for something more interesting than the standard wildlife viewing spots. She had searched the area extensively and knew the most photogenic locations were often away from the crowds. When they reached a bend in the trail where a shallow pool extended into a grove of moss-draped trees, Brielle spotted what looked like the perfect backdrop. The water was only knee-deep, with what appeared to be an old log extending from the bank, ideal for a unique perspective shot with the Spanish moss creating a natural frame. American alligators are perfectly adapted ambush predators, capable of remaining motionless for hours while waiting for prey. They can hold their breath for up to 24 hours and often float just below the surface with only their eyes and nostrils exposed. An adult alligator's bite force exceeds 2,900 pounds per square inch, stronger than any other animal in North America. They typically avoid humans, but will attack if surprised or if they perceive a threat to their territory. Brielle waded into the shallow water, her phone held high as she composed the shot. Her friends called out warnings about snakes and alligators, but she waved them off with the confidence of someone who had spent countless hours in similar environments without incident. The water was warm and murky, stirred up by her movement as she approached what she assumed was a partially submerged log. The log was actually a 12-foot alligator that had been resting motionless in the shallow water, its body covered by a thin layer of algae and debris. The reptile had been there for hours, perfectly camouflaged and waiting for fish or birds to come within striking range. Brielle's approach and the vibrations from her movement triggered its predatory instincts. She positioned herself carefully, 1 foot on what she believed was solid wood, preparing to squat down for the perfect angle. The surface felt rough and stable beneath her sneaker as she shifted her weight and raised her phone to capture the shot. The alligator exploded from the water with terrifying speed, its massive jaw snapping shut around Brielle's leg just above the knee. The force of the bite shattered her femur instantly as the reptile's teeth, designed to grip and hold prey, punctured deep into muscle and bone. Brielle's scream was cut short as the alligator's death roll began. The reptile spun violently, using its powerful tail and body weight to disorient its prey. Brielle was pulled under the murky water, her phone flying from her hand as she was dragged toward deeper water. The alligator's grip never loosened as it continued the death roll, a hunting technique designed to drown prey and tear away chunks of flesh. Her friends screamed from the bank, but there was nothing they could do. The water churned red as the alligator's teeth found arteries, and Brielle's struggles grew weaker with each passing second. Within 2 minutes, the thrashing stopped, and the water began to settle. Park rangers arrived within 20 minutes, alerted by the frantic 911 call from Brielle's friends. They used long poles and noisemakers to drive the alligator away from the area, but it was too late. Brielle's body was recovered 18 hours later by specialized teams who tracked the alligator to its den through drag marks in the mud. The investigation revealed that Brielle had ignored multiple warning signs posted throughout the refuge about alligator dangers. The attack was ruled accidental, with no fault assigned to park management. The alligator was captured and relocated to a more remote area of the Everglades, following standard protocols for animals involved in fatal encounters. Brielle's Instagram account became a memorial, with friends and family sharing memories of her passion for nature and photography. Her final post, uploaded automatically from her phone's scheduled content, was a photo of sunrise over the wetlands with a caption about the beauty of Florida's wild spaces. The refuge added additional warning signs and increased ranger patrols in areas where visitors might be tempted to leave designated paths. Brielle's death served as a stark reminder that even familiar environments can harbor deadly surprises. It was September 3rd, 2017, and humid Florida air hung thick over the suburban neighborhood of Lakeland, where Spanish moss draped from ancient oak trees like funeral shrouds. The afternoon sun blazed mercilessly, pushing temperatures into the mid-90s. Rick Mendez was addicted to attention and validation in the digital age. At 39, he built his entire identity around his social media presence, particularly on TikTok and Instagram, where videos featuring Princess regularly garnered hundreds of thousands of views. What had started as genuine fascination with reptiles had morphed into something more dangerous, a relentless pursuit of viral content. The backyard pool party was meant to be the ultimate content creation opportunity. His nephew Miguel's 8th birthday combined with a live demonstration that would surely break his previous view records. Ricky had been planning this moment for weeks. Princess was an impressive specimen, measuring just over 7 feet from snout to tail and weighing approximately 180 pounds. Her dark armored hide bore scars from early life in the wild before Ricky had acquired her through questionable channels 5 years earlier. The modified above-ground pool dominated the far corner of the property, originally intended for swimming but drained and converted into a habitat for Princess. The pool walls had been reinforced with concrete blocks, and a custom filtration system maintained water quality in what Ricky proudly called his backyard Everglades. American alligators represent one of nature's most successful predators, virtually unchanged by evolution for over 200 million years. They're perfectly adapted for life as ambush hunters in aquatic environments, capable of remaining motionless for hours, then exploding into action with lightning speed. The birthday party was in full swing by 4 p.m. with approximately 15 guests ranging from young children to elderly grandparents. Adults clustered around patio tables with cold beers, while children ran around the yard, their laughter mixing with sounds of Latin music that would soon be replaced by screams. At exactly 4:12 p.m., Ricky stepped over the pool's edge into the shallow water, his bare feet finding purchase on the concrete bottom. Princess lay motionless on her basking platform with only her eyes and nostrils visible above the waterline, appearing almost statue-like in her stillness, a deception that would prove fatal. What happened next defied all of Ricky's previous experience with Princess. Without any warning signs, Princess exploded into motion with terrifying speed that had made her species apex predators for millions of years. Her massive jaws opened to reveal rows of canonical teeth, and she lunged forward, clamping down on Ricky's left forearm with crushing force that shattered the radius and ulna instantly. The sound of breaking bones was clearly audible above the sudden screams of party guests. Ricky's confident smile vanished, replaced by an expression of shock and disbelief as Princess's jaws locked around his arm like a biological vice. With Ricky's arm still trapped in her jaws, Princess immediately began the death roll that is the signature killing technique of all crocodilians. She began spinning rapidly in the water, her powerful tail providing the torque necessary to generate tremendous rotational force that created devastating stress on joints and bones. Ricky's screams of agony filled the backyard as Princess continued her deadly rotation. His left arm, still locked in her jaws, began to separate from his shoulder as tendons, muscle, and ligaments were stretched beyond their breaking point. Blood clouded the pool water, creating a crimson swirl that followed the alligator's movements. Party guests reacted with a mixture of horror and paralysis. Children screamed and ran toward the house while adults stood frozen in shock. Carmen Mendez, Ricky's sister, began screaming his name while frantically dialing 911 with trembling fingers. Princess completed her first death roll and surfaced briefly, Ricky's mangled arm still clamped in her jaws. The force of rotation had torn his shoulder from its socket, and his left arm now hung at an impossible angle, connected to his torso by only a few remaining strands of muscle and skin. But Princess wasn't finished. Repositioning her grip, she released Ricky's destroyed arm, only to clamp down on his midsection with even greater force. Her teeth penetrated through his ribs and into internal organs, while the second death roll proved even more devastating than the first, spinning with mechanical precision that pulverized bone and tissue. Emergency services arrived to find a scene that defied training and experience. Captain James Morrison, a 20-year veteran, had dealt with various animal attacks, but nothing had prepared him for the blood-filled pool, floating body parts, and massive alligators still circling her victim with predatory satisfaction. Dr. Sarah Chen, the county's wildlife veterinarian, made the difficult decision to use lethal force rather than risk additional casualties. The rifle shot that ended Princess's life echoed across the suburban neighborhood, finally allowing rescue personnel to enter the pool and recover what remained of Ricky Mendez. September 14, 2018 marked the second day of an intensive search operation along the murky waters of the St. Johns River in northeastern Florida. The humid air hung thick with moisture as evening approached, casting an eerie stillness over the cypress-lined waterway. Spanish moss draped from ancient trees like funeral shrouds, while the brackish water reflected the fading amber light. Deputy Mark Alston, a 34-year-old veteran of the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office, had volunteered for the river detail after a local teenager vanished near the popular fishing docks. Mark brought 8 years of law enforcement experience to the search, including specialized training in water recovery operations. Known for his unwavering determination and refusal to abandon a case, Mark had earned a reputation among colleagues for going the extra mile when others had given up. Having grown up along Florida's waterways, he possessed intimate knowledge of the St. Johns River's treacherous currents. Knowledge that had made him invaluable in previous water rescues, but had also bred a dangerous overconfidence. The missing teenager case struck him personally. His son was only 2 years younger than Tommy Chen, driving Mark to push beyond reasonable safety limits in his desperate search for answers. The missing person case had gripped the community. 17-year-old Tommy Chen had disappeared while fishing alone, leaving behind only his tackle box and a half-eaten sandwich on the weathered dock. His bicycle remained chained to the pier railing. The St. Johns River, known for its deceptive currents and hidden dangers, had claimed lives before. Mark had spent the entire day methodically scanning the shoreline, pushing through dense palmetto undergrowth and navigating treacherous mudflats. The oppressive Florida heat had drained most volunteers by afternoon, yet Mark persisted, driven by the hope of bringing closure to a grieving family. As twilight descended, Mark noticed something unusual snagging in the gnarled roots of a massive bald cypress. A scrap of blue fabric fluttered just beneath the water's surface, approximately 15 feet from shore. The discovery sent adrenaline coursing through his system as he radioed his partner, Deputy Sarah Martinez, who was canvassing the opposite bank several hundred yards downstream. The American alligator represents one of nature's most perfectly evolved predators, unchanged for millions of years. These apex predators inhabit freshwater environments throughout the southeastern United States, with Florida hosting the largest population. Adult males can reach lengths exceeding 14 feet and weight surpassing 1,000 pounds. Their powerful jaws generate bite forces of nearly 3,000 psi. Alligators are ambush predators, remaining motionless for hours while waiting for prey to venture within striking distance. Their eyes, nostrils, and ears are positioned on top of their skulls, allowing them to remain nearly completely submerged. During cooler months, they often seek shelter beneath undercut banks, making them virtually invisible. Without hesitation, Mark descended the steep embankment, his boots finding purchase on the slippery mud. The water felt surprisingly warm as it reached his shins, the murky surface concealing the bottom completely. He waded carefully toward the tangled fabric, each step stirring up clouds of sediment. The massive alligator had been resting beneath the undercut bank for hours, its prehistoric form perfectly camouflaged among the submerged roots. The 13-foot male had likely been drawn to the area by increased human activity. As Mark's legs disturbed the water directly above its hiding spot, the predator's ancient instincts triggered an explosive response. The attack came without warning. The alligator's massive jaws erupted from the murky depths, clamping down on Mark's left leg just below the knee with devastating force. The initial bite crushed through his tactical pants, skin, and muscle tissue, the serrated teeth penetrating deep into bone. Mark's startled cry echoed across the water as the predator's powerful neck muscles contracted. The alligator immediately initiated its signature death roll, a violent spinning motion designed to disorient prey and cause massive trauma. Mark's body was yanked beneath the surface as the reptile rotated with tremendous force, twisting his leg at an unnatural angle. During the death roll, Mark's head repeatedly struck submerged logs and roots, causing severe cranial trauma. The alligator's grip never loosened as it continued the violent rotation, each revolution causing additional tissue damage and blood loss. The alligator's powerful tail thrashed violently, propelling both predator and victim deeper into the canal. The death roll continued for nearly 2 minutes, causing catastrophic internal injuries and massive blood loss. As Mark's struggles weakened, the alligator adjusted its grip, repositioning its jaws higher on its torso. The crushing bite force compressed his ribcage, fracturing multiple ribs and puncturing his left lung. Water flooded into his damaged respiratory system as consciousness faded, the combination of trauma, blood loss, and drowning proving fatal. The predator eventually released its grip, allowing Mark's lifeless body to drift downstream. The alligator then retreated as Deputy Martinez rushed toward the disturbance. Martinez arrived within minutes of hearing the initial splash, finding only churned water and floating debris. Mark's radio floated among the scattered equipment, its emergency beacon flashing uselessly in the gathering darkness. She immediately called for backup and dive teams. The recovery operation commenced at dawn, with specialized dive teams from multiple agencies converging on the search area. After 14 hours of intensive searching, recovery divers located Mark's body wedged beneath a massive submerged log approximately 200 yards downstream. The Jacksonville Sheriff's Office launched a comprehensive investigation into the incident, reviewing safety protocols for water-based operations. The local community mourned the loss of a dedicated public servant. Mark left behind a wife and 2 young children. It was July 22, 2017, and the Florida sun beat down mercilessly on the vast expanse of the Everglades, turning the wetlands into a shimmering maze of heat and humidity. An airboat cut through the tall sawgrass, its engine roaring as it carried 6 college friends on what was meant to be the perfect farewell weekend. Amelia Navarro, a 23-year-old photography student from the University of Miami, had planned this trip as her goodbye to Florida. In just 10 days, she would start her new job in San Diego, leaving behind 4 years of memories with her closest friends, Sasha, Danny, Elise, and twin brothers Tyler and Evan. They had been inseparable throughout college, bonding over late-night adventures and weekend escapes to Florida's wild places. Amelia was the group's unofficial photographer, her Nikon camera a permanent fixture around her neck. Her Instagram feed was filled with stunning shots of Florida's natural beauty, each image carefully composed to capture the magic she saw in the world around her. This Everglades expedition wasn't just another adventure. It was her chance to create one final masterpiece before everything changed. Their captain, a weathered local with decades of experience navigating the wetlands, had promised them something special. He knew secret routes through parts of the Everglades that most tourists never saw, hidden channels where wildlife thrived undisturbed. The group was in high spirits as they glided through the maze of waterways, passing around drinks and laughing as their guide pointed out herons, turtles, and the occasional alligator basking in the distance. As the afternoon sun began its descent toward the horizon, the captain offered to stop at a small patch of marshland where the group could capture the perfect sunset photos. The boat's engine fell silent as they approached a strip of spongy ground, barely firm enough to support their weight. The friends disembarked carefully, the captain warning them to stay close and not wander too far from the boat. But Amelia, always seeking the perfect composition, stepped away from the group to capture the light spilling across the reeds. She positioned herself at the edge of the marsh, the setting sun behind her creating a golden silhouette as she raised her camera. Through her viewfinder, she framed the shot, her friends laughing in the background, the vast wilderness stretching endlessly beyond. It was the kind of image that would perfectly capture this moment, this friendship, this chapter of her life that was about to end. Then the water exploded. What none of them fully understood was the nature of the predators that ruled these waters. American alligators are ancient survivors, virtually unchanged for 200 million years. While generally less aggressive than their crocodilian cousins, they are still formidable hunters capable of explosive bursts of speed reaching 35 miles per hour in water. Their bite force exceeds 2,900 pounds per square inch, enough to crush a turtle's shell or snap bones instantly. The captain saw it first, a barely perceptible ripple in the reeds just a few feet from where Amelia stood. He opened his mouth to shout a warning, but the massive alligator erupted from the water with terrifying speed before any words could form. The reptile, nearly 12 feet long and weighing close to 800 pounds, launched itself from the shallows with its jaws wide, clamping down across Amelia's torso with devastating force. The sound was primal and horrifying. Water crashing, teeth slamming together, and Amelia's single piercing scream that echoed across the wetlands. Her friends froze in shock, their minds struggling to process what they were witnessing. Sasha dropped her phone, Danny stumbled into the reeds, and Elise's scream rose into a wave of panic that filled the air. The twins, Tyler and Evan, moved instinctively toward the water's edge, but stopped short as the massive reptile began its death roll, a spinning maneuver alligators use to disorient prey and tear flesh. Amelia's body disappeared beneath the churning surface as the predator dragged her toward deeper water. Her camera strap the last thing visible before it too vanished into the dark depths. The captain threw a rope toward the spot where the water was churning, shouting desperate instructions. But it was already too late. The alligator had vanished into the maze of reeds and murky channels, taking Amelia with it. The surface gradually settled, returning to its deceptive calm as if nothing had happened. Only the ripples spreading outward and the friends' ragged breathing broke the terrible silence. They called 911 and emergency responders arrived within the hour, but the search would last 2 agonizing days. They eventually located the alligator's den, a hollow carved beneath a collapsed bank of vegetation, where they recovered partial remains that confirmed everyone's worst fears. The investigation revealed that this particular alligator had likely been fed by tourists, either directly or through careless disposal of food waste near the water. Wildlife officials explain that once an alligator associates humans with food, its natural wariness disappears, replaced by dangerous expectation. The sound of boat engines becomes a dinner bell, and the sight of people triggers predatory behavior rather than avoidance. Amelia's friends returned to their respective homes, forever changed by what they had witnessed. The framed photograph from that day showing Amelia smiling radiantly against the backdrop of the Everglades now serves not as a celebration of friendship and adventure, but as a memorial to a life cut tragically short by the ancient predators that still rule Florida's wild places. The incident led to increased safety protocols for Everglades tour operators and renewed efforts to educate visitors about the dangers of feeding wildlife. But for Amelia's friends, no amount of regulation could undo the trauma of watching their friend disappear beneath the dark waters. The morning of August 12, 2015 dawned with pristine beauty across Botswana's Okavango Delta. Natalie Rhodes, a 41-year-old documentary producer from London, adjusted her wide-brimmed hat as she settled into the narrow Mokoro canoe that would carry her through the crystal-clear channels of this UNESCO World Heritage Site. Natalie's career had been built on her ability to find compelling stories in remote locations around the world. Over 15 years, she's produced award-winning documentaries about everything from Arctic wildlife to Amazon rainforest conservation, always pushing for more authentic and immersive experiences. Her colleagues knew her as someone who was never satisfied with standard tourist experiences, always seeking the untold stories and unique perspectives that separated great documentaries from ordinary travel shows. Natalie's traveling companion was Sarah Mitchell, a wildlife photographer from Manchester who had become her closest friend during their university years. Sarah had invited Natalie on the trip after completing a successful assignment photographing elephants in Chobe National Park, and the two women had planned to spend a week exploring the Delta's maze of channels, islands, and lagoons. The Mokoro Safari operated under the guidance of local polars, expert navigators who had grown up in the Delta and possessed intimate knowledge of its seasonal changes, wildlife patterns, and hidden dangers. These traditional dugout canoes had been the primary means of transportation in the Delta for over 1,000 years. Natalie's polar was Thabo, a 35-year-old local guide whose family had been navigating the Delta for generations. Before their journey began, Thabo had explained the Delta's most dangerous inhabitants, knowledge that could mean the difference between life and death in these pristine waters. The Nile crocodile was the apex predator of the Delta waterways, a living dinosaur that had remained virtually unchanged for over 200 million years. These massive reptiles could grow up to 20 feet in length and weigh over 1,500 pounds. With jaws capable of exerting a bite force of over 3,000 pounds per square inch, enough to crush a small car. What makes Nile crocodiles particularly dangerous to humans is their hunting strategy and incredible patience. These predators are ambush hunters, capable of remaining motionless for hours while waiting for prey to come within striking distance. When prey approaches the water's edge, crocodiles can explode from the surface with enough force to launch their entire body out of the water. On their fourth day, the group had been traveling through a narrow channel when they encountered a section where the water was too shallow for the Mokoros to pass through fully loaded. The standard procedure was for passengers to step out briefly into the shallow water while the polars maneuvered the empty canoes through the obstacle. Thabo had performed this maneuver hundreds of times during his guiding career, and he carefully selected a spot where the water was only ankle deep with a firm sandy bottom visible through the clear water. He explained to Natalie and her companion Sarah that they would need to step out for just a few minutes while he guided the empty Makoro canoe through the shallow section. Thabo had checked for hippos and crocodile signs before selecting the spot, and his years of experience had taught him to read the subtle environmental cues that indicated predator presence. However, what none of them realized was that a large Nile crocodile had been resting motionless on the bottom of the channel for the past several hours. The crocodile's presence in this particular channel was not unusual. These predators regularly patrol the delta's waterways. This particular individual was a mature male, approximately 14 feet in length and weighing over 800 pounds, with the patience and hunting experience that came from decades of successful predation. As Natalie stepped carefully from her Makoro into the shallow water, her foot made contact with the sandy bottom just meters from where the crocodile lay waiting. The vibrations from her footsteps triggered the predator's attack response. Crocodiles possess specialized sensory organs that can detect the slightest vibrations in water, allowing them to locate prey with pinpoint accuracy even in murky conditions. The attack happened with the shocking speed that has made crocodiles successful predators for over 200 million years. The massive reptile's jaws clamped down on Natalie's right leg just above the ankle. Its 3,000 pounds per square inch bite force crushing bone and severing major blood vessels instantly. The crocodile's death roll began immediately, the spinning motion designed to disorient prey and cause massive tissue damage while dragging the victim underwater. Thabo reacted with quick thinking that came from years of experience in dangerous waters. He immediately began striking the crocodile's head and snout with his wooden pole, aiming for the sensitive areas around the eyes and nostrils that might cause the predator to release its grip. Sarah grabbed her paddle and joined the desperate attempt to free Natalie from the crocodile's jaws. But Nile crocodiles are built for exactly this type of encounter. Once their jaws close on prey, the muscles that control their bite are among the strongest in the animal kingdom, designed to maintain their grip even under extreme stress. The crocodile's prehistoric brain was focused on a single objective: dragging its prey to deeper water where it could complete the kill without interference. Despite the combined efforts of Thabo and Sarah, the crocodile succeeded in pulling Natalie beneath the surface of the channel. The entire attack had lasted less than 20 seconds, but those seconds had been enough to transform a peaceful documentary research trip into an unthinkable tragedy. Natalie's remains were finally recovered nearly 3 kilometers downstream from the attack site, in a quiet backwater where the crocodile had apparently fed before abandoning the carcass. The discovery brought closure to her family and friends, but also served as a stark reminder of the Delta's hidden dangers. It was February 14th, 2015, when Lance Beck and Reed Donnelly arrived at Kakadu National Park in Australia's Northern Territory. The two roommates from Brisbane had driven over 1,400 kilometers to reach one of the continent's most remote wilderness areas. At 27 and 28 years old, Lance and Reed had built a modest following as amateur nature vloggers, specializing in extreme heat endurance challenges and off-grid survival content. Kakadu National Park encompasses nearly 20,000 square kilometers of pristine wetlands and untamed wilderness. During February, the region experiences brutal weather conditions, with temperatures regularly exceeding 40 degrees Celsius. The landscape transforms into a furnace of red earth, scattered eucalyptus trees, and vast floodplains that stretch endlessly toward the horizon. The park's wetland systems become particularly treacherous during the wet season, when seasonal flooding creates perfect hunting grounds for apex predators. Warning signs posted throughout the area clearly indicate restricted zones and dangerous wildlife activity. But many visitors underestimate the lethal nature of creatures inhabiting these seemingly peaceful waterways. Lance and Reed had planned an ambitious multi-day hiking expedition through Kakadu's most challenging terrain, deliberately choosing February to showcase their heat endurance capabilities. Both men prided themselves on their physical conditioning and survival knowledge, though their actual wilderness experience was limited to weekend camping trips near Brisbane. They carried professional camera equipment, basic camping gear, and what they believed was sufficient water. The roommates had met 3 years earlier while working at a Brisbane fitness center, bonding over extreme outdoor challenges and social media content creation. Lance, a personal trainer, served as the primary on-camera personality, while Reed, a graphic designer, handled filming duties. Their channel featured content about pushing physical limits in harsh environments, often with clickbait titles promising dangerous survival scenarios. Their goal was to film a comprehensive multi-day survival guide while hiking through Kakadu's most remote sections during peak heat season. They planned to document water procurement techniques, heat management strategies, and navigation skills while maintaining their usual high-energy presentation style. The duo had researched basic survival techniques online, but lacked formal training in wilderness survival. On their first 2 days, Lance and Reed made reasonable progress through designated hiking areas, filming segments about heat management and basic bushcraft techniques. However, their water consumption exceeded planned amounts due to extreme temperatures and inexperience with proper hydration management. By the morning of their 3rd day, their water supplies had dwindled to less than half a liter between them. Saltwater crocodiles are among the world's most formidable apex predators, with adult males reaching lengths of up to 7 meters and weighing over 1,000 kilograms. These ancient reptiles have remained virtually unchanged for millions of years, perfectly adapted for ambush hunting in aquatic environments. Their powerful jaws generate bite forces exceeding 3,700 pounds per square inch, capable of crushing bones and dragging prey underwater with devastating efficiency. During Australia's wet season, saltwater crocodiles become increasingly active and aggressive as rising water levels expand their hunting territories. These opportunistic predators can remain motionless for hours, submerged with only their eyes and nostrils visible, waiting for unsuspecting prey to approach the water's edge. Their explosive acceleration allows them to launch surprise attacks with lightning speed, often giving victims no opportunity to escape. By midday on February 16th, Lance and Reed found themselves desperate. The temperature had climbed to 42 degrees Celsius, and they had been hiking for nearly 6 hours without water. Dehydration was affecting their judgment, though they continued filming their ordeal. Reed's camera captured their increasingly desperate search for water sources as they deviated from marked trails. Consulting their map, the pair identified what appeared to be a dried riverbed leading to a known waterhole used by tour groups during the dry season. However, the area was clearly marked as restricted during wet season months, with multiple warning signs indicating dangerous crocodile activity. In their dehydrated and desperate state, Lance and Reed chose to ignore these warnings and bushwhack directly toward the waterhole. The trek through the dense scrubland and swampy terrain took over 2 hours, with both men showing clear signs of heat exhaustion. Their camera footage shows labored breathing, stumbling movements, and increasingly poor decision-making as dehydration clouded their judgment. They pushed through thick vegetation across muddy flats, driven by the urgent need to find water. When they finally reached the waterhole, it appeared as salvation in the brutal heat. The body of water stretched approximately 50 meters across, surrounded by lush vegetation and offering the first shade they had encountered in hours. What they failed to recognize were subtle signs of crocodile presence, slide marks on muddy banks, floating debris that could conceal submerged predators, and the unnatural stillness of the water's surface. Lance, overcome by desperation and heat exhaustion, immediately rushed toward the water's edge without conducting any safety assessment. He waded directly into the shallows, kneeling down and using his shirt to scoop water toward his mouth. Reed remained on the bank approximately 10 meters away, continuing to film what he believed would be dramatic survival footage. The attack came with terrifying suddenness. A massive 4-meter saltwater crocodile that had been lying motionless in deeper water exploded toward the surface, its powerful tail propelling its enormous body forward with incredible speed. The prehistoric predator's jaws clamped down on Lance's torso with bone-crushing force, its teeth penetrating deep into his chest and abdomen. Lance's body disappeared beneath the surface as the crocodile initiated its death roll, spinning rapidly to disorient and drown its prey. The water turned red with blood as the massive reptile's jaws crushed ribs and punctured vital organs. Lance's attempts to surface were futile against the crocodile's overwhelming strength and the disorienting effects of the death roll technique. Reed, witnessing his friend's attack, made the fatal mistake of stepping closer to the water's edge while continuing to film. A second saltwater crocodile, equally massive and attracted by the commotion, launched itself from the shallows directly at Reed. The predator's jaw seized Reed's legs, dragging him into the water before he could react or attempt to escape. Both attacks occurred within seconds of each other, with neither victim having any opportunity to fight back or call for help. The crocodile's powerful jaws and death roll techniques ensured that both men were killed almost instantly, their bodies disappearing beneath the murky water as the predators secured their prey. Park rangers discovered the abandoned camera equipment 4 days later during a routine patrol of the restricted area. The memory card contained crucial footage that helped authorities reconstruct the events leading to both deaths. The video evidence showed the men's deteriorating condition due to dehydration, their decision to ignore warning signs, and the actual crocodile attacks. Recovery efforts for both the bodies proved extremely difficult due to the remote location and the presence of multiple large crocodiles in the area. The incident sparked renewed discussions about social media influencers taking unnecessary risks for content creation, with many pointing to the dangers of inexperienced adventurers attempting extreme challenges without proper training. September 14, 2020 brought oppressive humidity and threatening skies to Baton Rouge, Louisiana, as the remnants of Hurricane Laura continued to dump torrential rain across the region. The storm had passed through 2 days earlier, leaving behind flooded streets and standing water that transformed familiar landscapes into temporary wetlands where dangerous wildlife could appear in unexpected places. Coach Darnell Price was a 51-year-old PE teacher who had become a beloved institution at Magnolia Elementary School over his 25-year career. Standing 6 feet tall with a booming laugh that could be heard across the playground, Coach Price was known throughout the school district for his unwavering dedication to his students and his ability to make even the most reluctant children excited about physical activity. The week following Hurricane Laura had been challenging for everyone at Magnolia Elementary. The school had been closed for 2 days while maintenance crews cleared debris and ensured the building was safe. When classes finally resumed on Thursday, the children were restless and eager to burn off energy after being cooped up indoors. The decision to allow outdoor recess on Friday morning was not made lightly. Principal Martinez had consulted with maintenance staff and personally inspected the playground area before giving approval. The rain had finally stopped, and while the ground remained soggy with puddles in low-lying areas, the playground equipment appeared safe, and the children desperately needed the opportunity to play outside. What school officials didn't fully appreciate was the extent to which the flooding had displaced wildlife throughout the region. The storm surge and heavy rainfall had inundated vast areas of wetland habitat, forcing alligators and other semi-aquatic species to seek higher ground and new territory. American alligators are perfectly adapted to Louisiana's wetland environment and are among the most powerful predators in North America. Adult males can reach lengths of 14 feet and weigh over 1,000 pounds. Their jaws can exert a crushing force of over 3,000 pounds per square inch, one of the strongest bite forces in the animal kingdom. Alligators can remain motionless for hours, appearing like logs, before exploding into action at speeds of up to 25 miles per hour on land. During flood conditions, they become displaced from familiar territory and may be more aggressive as they compete for new resources. What the children and school staff didn't know was that a mature male, approximately 8.5 feet long and weighing close to 400 pounds, was within the proximity of the school. He had been displaced from his normal habitat 3 miles from the school and had spent 2 days navigating flooded drainage systems. The school's location in a slight depression, combined with the playground's proximity to a storm drain outlet, had made it an attractive resting spot. As the children poured onto the playground that Friday morning, their excitement was infectious. Coach Price positioned himself in the center where he could maintain visual contact with all activity zones: the swings, climbing structure, basketball court, and open field. The playground had been inspected by maintenance staff, but the inspection had focused on structural damage and debris removal rather than wildlife concerns. The alligator had likely been present for several hours before being discovered, having taken refuge in a shallow, muddy depression near the large slide during pre-dawn hours when the area was deserted. His natural camouflage and motionless behavior had made him virtually invisible to casual observation, and the muddy conditions provided perfect concealment. It was while Coach Price was helping kindergartners organize a game of tag that he noticed something unusual near the slide. What he initially took to be a fallen log was positioned in a way that seemed inconsistent with cleanup efforts. As Coach Price moved closer to investigate, he began to realize that what he was looking at was not debris at all. The shape was too organic, and as he watched more carefully, he detected the slight rise and fall that indicated breathing. The realization that he was looking at a large alligator hit him just as a group of second graders came running toward the slide area. The next few seconds unfolded with heightened awareness that accompanies moments of extreme crisis. Coach Price understood immediately that children's lives were in immediate danger, and that his response would determine whether this day ended in tragedy. The alligator, perhaps startled by the approaching children or simply reacting to movement, suddenly came to life with explosive power. Its massive jaws opened as it oriented toward the group of 7-year-olds who were completely unaware of the danger. Coach Price didn't hesitate. He charged forward with remarkable speed for a man his age, reaching the children just as the alligator was beginning its lunge. In one fluid motion, he grabbed the nearest child and threw her backward to safety. But his heroic action put him directly in the predator's path. The massive reptile's jaws, capable of crushing a bowling ball, clamped down on his right leg just below the knee with devastating force. The 3,000-pound bite pressure immediately shattering bone and tearing through muscle as the alligator began its characteristic death roll. The school's emergency protocols proved effective under these extreme circumstances. Within 2 minutes, additional staff had arrived, emergency services had been called, and the school was placed on lockdown. The alligator maintained its grip for approximately 4 minutes before wildlife officers arrived with specialized equipment. The animal was successfully tranquilized and removed, allowing emergency medical personnel to begin treating Coach Price's injuries. Coach Price was transported to Our Lady of the Lake Regional Medical Center, where trauma surgeons worked for over 6 hours to save his leg. The powerful jaws had crushed bone, severed muscles, and damaged blood vessels, requiring multiple surgical procedures and medical hardware to stabilize the fractures. While Coach Price survived the attack, the damage to his leg was permanent and life-changing. Despite multiple surgeries and months of rehabilitation, he never regained full mobility. The injury effectively ended his career as a physical education teacher, as he could no longer demonstrate activities or maintain the level of physical engagement that had defined his teaching style. However, the impact of his heroic actions extended far beyond his personal sacrifice. Emma, the child he had saved, suffered no physical injuries and returned to normal activities within days. The incident prompted immediate and comprehensive changes in school safety protocols throughout Louisiana, including specialized wildlife fencing and mandatory wildlife inspections after major storms. Coach Price's story became a powerful example of selfless dedication that defines the best educators. Despite his physical limitations, he remained connected to Magnolia Elementary as a volunteer and mentor. The school's gymnasium was renamed in his honor, and his photograph was prominently displayed with a plaque recognizing his heroism. The alligator responsible for the attack was relocated to a wildlife preserve after being determined to be in good health and exhibiting normal behavior patterns. Wildlife biologists noted that the animal's presence on the playground was entirely consistent with post-storm displacement patterns and did not indicate any unusual aggression or abnormal behavior. March 22, 2018. The remote backwaters of the Florida Everglades became the scene of a horrific tragedy that would expose the deadly consequences of social media stunts gone wrong. The vast wetland ecosystem, spanning over 1,500,000 acres, harbors one of nature's most formidable predators, the American alligator. Troy Lockett, a 26-year-old aspiring content creator from Homestead, Florida, had been struggling with his YouTube channel, Bayou Blunders. With only 3,600 subscribers, Troy specialized in chaotic Southern-style wildlife dares and redneck humor filmed throughout Florida's marshes and backroads. His videos featured increasingly dangerous stunts, like catching venomous snakes barehanded and wrestling wild boars, all in pursuit of the viral moment that would launch his television career. That humid Thursday afternoon, Troy drove to a secluded roadside swamp pull-off along the Taimai Trail, armed with a cooler full of raw chicken and dreams of internet fame. He had scouted this location previously, noting several large alligators that frequented the murky waters near the road. His plan was simple but reckless. Film himself feeding 3 wild gators raw chicken from a stick. American alligators are apex predators that have remained virtually unchanged for 200 million years. Adult males can reach lengths of 14 feet and weigh over 1,000 pounds, with jaw muscles capable of generating crushing forces exceeding 2,100 pounds per square inch. These ancient reptiles are opportunistic feeders and ambush hunters. When habituated to human feeding, they lose their natural fear and become increasingly aggressive in pursuing food sources. Troy set up his smartphone camera, propping it on a red lunchbox positioned on the muddy bank to capture the perfect angle. He grabbed his cooler and a long wooden stick, wading into knee-deep water while addressing his future audience with characteristic bravado. Troy shouted, his voice echoing across the still swamp as he impaled a raw chicken thigh on his makeshift feeding pole, announcing that it was time to see who was hungry today. The first alligator appeared within minutes, a 7-foot female that glided silently toward the scent of fresh meat. Troy held the stick extended, allowing the reptile to snatch the chicken with a powerful snap. Emboldened by success, he prepared another piece as a second gator, slightly larger than 8 feet, emerged from the opposite direction. As Troy stepped deeper into the murky water for better camera angles, he failed to notice the massive shape lurking motionless among the thick reeds behind him. A 12-foot male alligator weighing nearly 800 pounds had been watching the commotion with predatory interest. This ancient bull had been illegally fed by previous visitors for years, conditioning him to associate humans with easy meals and making him dangerously aggressive. Troy tossed another chicken thigh toward the second gator when his foot slipped on the slimy bottom sediment. He stumbled backward, arms flailing as he tried to regain balance, splashing loudly in the shallow water. The sudden movement and noise triggered the massive bull's attack instincts. The enormous alligator exploded from the reeds with terrifying speed, covering 15 feet in less than 2 seconds. Its massive jaws clamped down on Troy's left leg just above the knee with bone-crushing force, instantly shattering his femur and severing major blood vessels. Troy's agonized screams pierced the air as the predator began its signature death roll. The powerful reptile spun Troy's body violently through the water for nearly 20 seconds, each rotation causing additional fractures. The alligator's conical teeth ripped through muscle, tendons, and arteries. Troy's left leg was nearly severed at mid-thigh, held together only by strips of mangled tissue. Blood poured into the dark water as Troy thrashed desperately, his screams becoming weaker with each passing moment. The massive gator maintained its grip while repositioning for a better hold, its teeth now clamped around Troy's torso just below the rib cage. The crushing pressure fractured multiple ribs and punctured his lungs, making breathing impossible. As Troy's struggles weakened from massive blood loss, the alligator dragged him toward deeper water. The other two gators, attracted by the blood and commotion, began circling the area. The final moments came when the massive bull repositioned its jaws around Troy's upper torso and neck. The immense pressure crushed his cervical vertebrae and caused severe brain trauma. Troy's body went limp as the alligator continued its death roll, tearing away large sections of flesh. The smartphone continued recording for 14 agonizing minutes, capturing Troy's screams gradually fading to silence, followed by sounds of splashing water and occasional grunts from the feeding alligators. Troy's disappearance wasn't reported until Monday when he failed to show up for work. His truck was discovered at the remote pull-off by Florida Highway Patrol, along with his smartphone still propped on the lunchbox. Recovery divers found Troy's dismembered remains scattered across the swamp bottom 3 days later. Thanks for watching. Want to watch more? Click on your screen now.